Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of. Sorry, that's the wrong intro. But hello, everyone. Welcome to another discussion of the Thousandfold Thought, which is the third book in the Prince of Nothing trilogy by R. Scott Bakker. Um, we are reading this series about 100 pages every week and meeting weekly to discuss those 100 pages. Today, we're going to be discussing chapters 4 through 9 of the Thousandfold Thought, and next week will be how many other chapters gets us to 100 pages next. I think that's up to chapter 14. If you'd like to join us for these discussions, either here in this discussion group or on the PageChewing forum, just for textual discussions, come check out the PageChewing forum. With me, I have the usual group of people that we get to discuss this book with. Carl, would you like to start us off with introductions?
Yeah, I am Carl D. Albert, first-time reader of this trilogy, having a great time. I'm very much enjoying seeing things kind of coming together here towards the end of it all.
Nice. I thought Mike froze for a second there. We've been having a lot of technical issues today. Mike.
Yes. My name is Mike. This is my first time reading the series. I've really been enjoying it, if you can say that. Happy to discuss these chapters with you today.
And I'm Dan. I've read these books before. I've read other books too, I guess. I guess since Steve is not here for now, I'm the only one that has future knowledge. So I'll try to keep it to myself. Oh, maybe Steve is back.
Is Steve back? Can we hear him? Yes!
Oh, yes.
Excellent.
Jeez.
It's a big win, listeners.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure everyone's thrilled.
Oh, yes, Steve. We're doing introduction, so you came exactly at the right time.
Oh, cool. I'm Steve, and you can find me on PageChewing.com and all of the various PageChewing podcasts and on Varsha's channel and podcasts and speculative speculations.
Yes.
Yes.
All of those.
All of those.
Cool. I was telling the group earlier that these 5 chapters have been my favorite so far in the series. So what do all of you think? What are some high-level impressions?
I'm kind of surprised they're your favorite. I'm not that they were bad. I'm curious what made them your favorite.
Many things. The chapters with Confus and Nair, I think the internal monologues, there were a lot of internal monologues in these chapters, and I think after Malazan, that's kind of my jam. And Confus and Nair, even Confus, like he's an arrogant, self-centered ass, but everything he thinks to himself, I don't agree with them, but I loved reading through them and thinking about them, I guess. And sometimes when he has a point, I'm like, yeah, that thing I have to grapple with where I agree with people I don't like. And same with Nair, and we lost Steve again for a bit. Okay, he's back. With Nair, I think I'm forgetting, for all that I highlighted, what the high level aspects were that they were thinking so much about, but I really enjoyed reading all of his musings about what's going on. And I think then when we got to the part, Akamian and Esmenet really turned around for me, like that. Akamian accepting feeling better about losing Esmenet to Kellis, realizing that maybe he didn't do as much for her as he could have, perhaps, that how she's changed with Kellis, and Esmenet realizing that what Akamian's going through, like the conclusion of that with her going to Akamian and saying, I wanted to tell you that you are strong. I loved that whole them getting to understand each other a bit more, and all of the thought process that went into that as they grappled with that. So yeah,
Really.
I highlighted a lot. And dancing really in that menacing way, which means that it's probably going to change around again, knowing the series.
No, I'm just saying that, to me, even that part is very painful to read, like the whole
Mm,
relationship, because it does feel like, yeah, what you said is true, but it also feels like deep down they're not really, he still wants her, obviously. He's
yeah, yeah.
still, and she's still being manipulated by Kellis, right?
It's
Yes.
bittersweet. It's
Hmm.
definitely bittersweet. I will say I think I'm always pleased when we get these very heartfelt scenes and storylines and moments. It's something that you hear a lot of about the darkness in this series, understandably, like reasonably, because there is a lot of it, a lot of violence, a lot of just horrible things happening. But it really helps humanize the characters and ground the story. I feel like when you get just so profoundly, emotional and human and intimate moments. And I am right there with you, Varsha, that I really enjoyed that. I found it incredibly moving. It was troubling. It definitely left me upset, but also pleased, because it is nice that like someone
Mm.
sees a Camion for what he endures. And I actually think in some ways Esminet helped me feel even more of what Encamion, like, 'cause it's one thing to kind of see it from his perspective, and another thing to have like someone reinforce it and be like, no, this is really horrible, and that it was done in such an interesting way that it was from her reading stories, these
Yeah.
epics, the sagas, right? That is such a unique. I don't know if I've ever read anything like that before. Of someone like reading a story in a story and learning empathy, or like a deeper level of empathy through it. It was very meta and very well done, just all around. And that was probably the highlight for me, just because I did not expect it at all.
Mm.
And also kind of goes to show that Akamian was an idiot for not teaching her to read, because this
Mm,
could have helped him so much, helped their relationship so much, like years ago. But that's their
yeah.
flaws at work, right? And yeah, I'm with you. Confis is such a rich character that he's both like so smart and also so stupid at the same time. He's just so narcissistic and has such giant
Yeah.
blind spots that you can't help but think he's a moron, but he actually is like also a genius.
Yeah.
It's bizarre to read. And I keep expecting him to just completely lose, but somehow he keeps managing to squeak his way out,
Mm,
which is fun. And Nair, because Nair is like a force of nature, so I kind of expect Nair to just like find a way through it all. But Confis, again, just because he has this like slight like loser aspect to him, but he always manages to make it through. He is just a fantastic character.
yeah, yeah. I think this bit, even though he knew the man simply flattered him, Confess decided that he agreed. So he's just deciding to not think about anything, and just like, I'll make the world as I please, and I will be at the center of it. Yeah, I think these chapters brought a lot of depth to all of our characters. And yes, I'm vaguely on the periphery, terrified for what will happen to Esmenet when Kellis shows his Kellis colors to Esmenet, if and when that comes about. But in terms of like everything that I was dissatisfied with at the end of the last set of chapters with
Mhm.
regards to Akamian and Esmenet, how they were interacting with each other. I think Akamian, yeah, even him to a certain extent, I think he didn't get out of that um she's a whore mentality, but he seems to have moved on from that. They've both grown up so much in this, and we got a lot more depth into Nair and conflict. Like Nair is I think our resident philosopher. He has a lot of. I think he's our window into Kellis to a certain extent.
So I want to give Mike a moment to talk, but just before we do, two things. I don't think Akamian has grown up at all since the torture. I think he's just distanced from, like, I think the emotions have sort of settled down. Like Esmenet, I feel like has actually grown in these chapters, but I don't know that I feel like Akamian necessarily has. I feel like he's still the same person he was since the torture. Like the torture clearly changed him, and then seeing Esmenet is with Kellis changed him. But I just feel like he's sort of more emotionally distanced, like time heals all wounds, and not that the wounds are healed, but that they're not so raw as they were. And the second thing, which we can talk about in lots of detail, I'm sure. Did you guys read this the same way I did, that Nair is like learning to cut himself off from the darkness that comes before? Like that's what he's actively doing, that he's going outside and like the same things that Kellis is described as doing, Nair is doing, just kind of finding himself instinctively.
I think that is true. And also I think Confis to a certain extent, maybe he's a more what's that called? Lobotomy? A lobotomized version of the Logos. Because he's trying to manipulate things the same way that Kellis seems to be, except he's not very good at it, but then he's good at it. Like he made me think a lot about Kellis in this section, maybe because of his lack of concern for the norms, right? He doesn't care about the religion. He doesn't care about the. He tells the dude to not bow to him anymore. He's like, yeah, you can look me in the eye. I have no problem with that. So he's not one to set store by tradition and ritual, and that feels like cutting off a lot of the things that normal people set store by, and the lack of which allows Kellis to be as objective as he is, right? So I guess Nair and Confis are interesting because they're both semi-Dunian sort of. Like my point is Confis does not have a lot of what might constitute said darkness, and Nair is getting rid of it himself and realizing that too. So sorry, Mike, you go now.
No, I wouldn't challenge too much of what anybody said. I agree with you. I did have a different interpretation of Nair. I thought he seems to be going completely mad.
I agree with that. I want to say
what has maybe allowed him to welcome in his relationship with the consult, which I found the most fascinating part of the whole 5 chapters or so, the last 100 pages or so. I wrote down a lot of notes, like what the hell is going on here? Because it slowly builds. We kind of knew from, I think, the first section that we read that he was starting to see the synthes. And at first I was like, oh, he's dreaming, but no, I don't think. Yeah, no, he wasn't. And so it's just jarring. But I hope to talk about that a little bit more. But one thing I wanted to say about Confis, which I thought was really interesting, and I'm not sure how much he himself had to do with it, but the what is it? The Sake sorcerer Kemen Ketri is like, I have been waiting to be wielded, essentially. So he's kind of been. So we haven't heard much from that character, and I thought it was interesting. I think there was a point made that there, the Sake school is the only one that's like associated with, like a state or one of these fiefdoms or what have you. So I'm very curious. It's quite ominous. But then the other aspect that I also felt really, apart from what you all had discussed, but the fact that Akamian is continuing to teach Kellis all of his all of the gnosis, and even how Kellis manipulated Akamian. I don't know, or yes, yeah, right. It was tapping into Saswatha. I don't know how he did that. It was like he learned hypnosis or what have you. But there's just a lot. There was just a few other things that I noted that really I was like, oh wow. It's kind of, those are two things that are kind of in the background, and I'm curious how that'll play out. But I agree that I think, you know, the relationship with Esmenet, and I mean, I wrote this down. She, in chapter 6, she traveled in her black palanquin with a luxurious litter of 16 slaves. And she is now like the second most powerful after Kellis. So she's like really, you know, gone full circle here, the complete other side of the spectrum, where she was really considered, you know, very low status, if you will, in their terms of Janan or whatever. And there was a section where they said she has kind of completely, or that has been rewritten for her. So she is really coming, as we talked about the last time, but it's even more like people are bowing to her that are very high up, like Proyas and all of these others. So it's really there's just a lot of tension building. Just so it's just all around. So that's what I had mentioned before we started recording. You know, it's just. I feel my head is spinning a little bit, so I can't say this is my favorite, but there is really just, I'm impressed with what Bakker is doing. In addition, there's also a lot of exposition. There's a lot of info dump that is, I don't mind. I have some trouble following it, but it's really a head scratcher section here, so I'm anxious to see how it plans out.
I'm kind of surprised to hear everyone's feedback, because the way that I saw Kamian's reaction to Esmenet was more of almost like jealousy, that he wanted to be the one, like kind of like he didn't see her value in a way, like he took her for granted. And now that she has this position of power, now that Kellis has brought out these other things in her, and she's starting to gain power and gain knowledge and respect, kind of took it as it's almost like he's a little bit jealous it's not him in that position, and not that he wanted to be with Kellis, but he didn't have that position of power, and kind of like he wanted to be the one to bring that out in her, not so much that he regrets not it's more of like a selfish perspective, at least. So I'm a little bit interesting that everyone else's reaction to it.
But I feel if it's true, but my feeling is that he sees that Kellis is so much more, like he's like a prophet. So he's like, of course I couldn't do it. Like, okay, she's with him. It's like he's so much more than me. So he just sort of accepts it because of that, I feel.
It's true.
So I'm curious. I didn't get the impression at all that Akamian would like to trade places with Kellis in any way, even if it means that he'd get Esmenet back. But yeah, I'm wondering if I missed something.
But I feel like what Steve says was that Akamian wanted to be the one to bring Esmenet's full potential out.
Yeah.
Not be in Kellis' position, I think, right? He just wanted. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like he wanted credit for it. Like he wanted to be the one to do it. Or so she would be as grateful to him as she seems to be to Kellis for doing that.
But I think that just shows how ingrained like the patriarchy is in this world. It's like he never even thought about it. But now that it is there, he's like, yeah, obviously she can, and obviously she's smart at it. but he didn't even think remotely about it. But he doesn't have any problem with it, right?
Yeah, he didn't have a problem leaving time after time and going off on his little missions and leaving her behind after he told her he wouldn't. So I think he sees her differently now that he sees what she's capable of. Or
yeah.
Yeah. I think your take on it, Steve, is a good one. I would agree with you. It's a kind of like a role reversal in some ways. There was, what about the one section in there that I thought was kind of interesting where, I think it was before he kissed her or whatever. And he's like, I want to murder Kellis. It's like, he blurts it out, and then later on it's like, yeah, everybody knows, and we're not going to do anything about it. And I just found that to be, I thought that was going to be really bad for him. But I think what Kellis is able to do is he is able to change kind of the social norms and mores that exist, and show people like, all of these other things are possible, which is, I find it to be very striking that people would just kind of, I know it's because of who he is and what he's able to do. But he's kind of showing, I guess, what the society could be. I don't know. There's some commentary on that in here somewhere. I'm not a sociologist or anything, but I have a feeling that is what Bakker is doing a little bit. I think with, him giving the lecture on what was it, feminism, and to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kellis is not bound by any cultural traditions, so he doesn't see any problem with doing anything he wants to achieve his goals, right? So.
Exactly. Yeah. I find that really interesting, because that if you we can't, it's difficult to try to judge how the values that may exist in I don't know if this is a 15th century equivalent or who knows. But those are I do think about that a bit. So he's basically he's able to win hearts and minds. However, except for the men that are dutiful to Confis, which I think that was kind of surprising that there was, I don't know how many, but it was a fair number that still wanted to stay with him. I mean, so that shows that he hasn't, I guess he doesn't have full control over everybody.
Yeah. I think the way I read that, Steve, why I came to a different conclusion about the Akamian feeling about Asminette. The way I read this was that he's come to the realization that he was insufficient, or he did not bring out the best of her in their relationship together, which is, I think it was more that he felt like he didn't do a good job then, than that he wished he could redo things, or that he had done those things for her. Like even if that has, I forget if that's a thought that he did have, that he wished he had done better, which I don't think he explicitly came out and thought. He just was realizing all the ways in which he was insufficient. Like he concludes with, I failed her, he realized, right? So it's more that I think he's analyzing what Kellis did for her that he did not do, and why she seems to be a better person now than she used to be with him, or that he didn't bring out the best in her, which for me is a realization that, this person could have been so much more, and I sort of restricted them, or I didn't see them for more than like they were bound by my perceptions of them. So that realization for him, I think, is important. I didn't read that as envy, just more self-realization. Maybe that's where we're differing in our conclusions.
Maybe it's both.
Yeah, like Dan mentioned, I think the how deeply rooted the patriarchy is in this series, and that's part of it, is it never crossed his mind to think that she's capable of being more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I have been looking desperately to try to find the because I think this is really important.
Mhm.
And I got interesting reactions from the guys who read it before, so I don't think I'm misreading this. That I'm with you, Mike. Nair's going insane. I mean, Nair's been insane for a while. Arguably, he's always been insane. But I'm telling you, he's having some. He's not perfect at it, but he's learning like the logos without being taught it. Like one of the first things is on page 105 in the paperback is he towards the bottom, there were two pasts. Nair understood that now. There's the past that men remembered, and there was the past that determined. And rarely, if ever, were they the same. All men stood in thrall of the latter, and knowing this made them insane. So they're beginning to identify the darkness that comes before. And then on page 158, he cackled aloud when the revelation struck. And for a moment, the world itself wobbled. A sense of power suffused him, so intense it seemed something other might snap from his frame. But throwing out his arms, he could shear Jokta's walls from their foundations. Cast into the horizon, no reason bound him, nothing, no scruple, no instinct, no habit, no calculation, no hate. He stood beyond origin or outcome. He stood nowhere. And his men, are asking, what amuses you? And he thinks that I once cared for my life. Like he's separating himself from everything. He's wondering, like, why are people doing the things they're doing? And he's coming to these realizations that it's all bullshit, and that, their opinions, their perspectives all come from, where they stand in their pasts. And that he, in that moment, it doesn't last clearly, but he is finding these moments where, to me, that section read distinctly as him embodying the logos briefly in a moment of having this moment where he cuts himself off from the darkness that comes before and sees the world like Kella sees it. I just don't think he can hold on to that yet. That it's for him, it's a temporary, a passing state, you could say.
Wow. Yeah. That's great. I actually had jotted down other things this has come up over and over again, and maybe even in book 2. There's in italics, it's written often in the Nair POV. I'm forgetting something is happening over and over again. So to me, that really supports, I think, what you're saying. I wasn't even sure what it was. So I think I actually was thinking something totally different. So I'm maybe embarrassed to say it.
Yeah, go for it.
So, okay, it's chapter 9, starts with, he awoke, more ancient. And I thought, this is a reference to the no God. And he's somehow channeling the no God. Because we forget, isn't that what the Skavendi worship? Like, I keep thinking about that in the back of my mind. Like, so that was something I was like, maybe he's like the antithesis of, or the I don't know what the right terminology would be, but he's doing the no God version of the logos or something. Maybe that's what because he's also then like, he's basically, in league with the consult. So, but that's what I was thinking. I think your interpretation is also, like, I wouldn't disagree with it at all.
I mean, I don't like totally disagree with what you're saying either, because I think it's not like he's coming at this in the exact like Dunyain way, right? Like he's not being taught. Right. He's having this sort of, it's almost like through madness, he's finding a degree of enlightenment, really messed up enlightenment, but enlightenment nonetheless. Like he's learning things in his brokenness. And I mean, because it's just so, for the longest time, I was like, does he think Surway is, in quotes, Surway is Surway? And it's clear he doesn't. He knows she's not. But at the same time, it's enough. And it, I think, highlights his perspective this entire time, which is that she's just an object to him. And so this Surway is Surway enough for him, because he never really cared about the soul of the woman. He never really cared who she was. it's this treasure, this prize for him. And so if it's a consult skin spy, whatever, I am curious what he is kind of planning. I mean, obviously he wants still to find Moingus and get back into things, but does he even have a plan, really? It's unclear. Like, how is he planning on developing his relationship with the consult? It's clear he doesn't really trust them. I mean, he's not an idiot, but he is going along with them. That whole storyline is, I wasn't sure where they were going to take Nair, and I'm so glad this is where it went. Like, this was the right path for his character. It's so interesting, especially with, as you mentioned, Mike, the history of the Skilvendi and their tie to the No God and the consult, that I just think this is such an interesting way of drawing parallels there, right, with history, but in a potentially very new way, right, that these cycles are finding new shape.
There's it's toward the I couldn't find it, but the last chapter we read, there is a reference to like different. It's either madness or genius, but something about him
Both.
being possessed by the origin of madness could be, being possessed by the demonic, and then there's a lot of references to him kind of representing the god of war. I wrote down, what was the guy's name? Anyway, a lot going on here. just with Nair alone is like, wow.
It is interesting how so many of these characters view themselves like gods or compare themselves to gods or some sort of divine beings. Like, you have Confis and all the Ikuris, right? That's kind of their basic belief system, is the emperor is like a god and must be worshipped like one. And then now obviously you have Kellis, who is in a semi-divine state, although he doesn't necessarily believe that is literally true, but that is how he is projecting himself onto the world. And then Nair, now, like he said, views himself as both a demon and a god of war. And there's a lot of overlap there potentially. And yeah, just it's an interesting continued thematic development there.
But I think probably Nair doesn't actually. Like, I think Compass might delude himself, but probably Nair, I don't think he does. I think Nair understands a lot more about himself, and I don't know.
I don't know that if that is true now, I definitely don't think that was always true, because, he had his whole saying of like, I am the, what is it? Like the killers of, I forget what he calls himself, but like, he basically
the most violent of all men, I think.
Yeah, the most violent of all men, right? That he like created this persona for himself because he was so filled with self-loathing that I think he is still to some degree grappling with, although he seems to be, again, kind of cutting himself off from it. That he definitely had deluded himself. I don't know. That's the thing with Nair, and that I struggle to pin down, is I feel like he's a paradox constantly, that he believes two things at once. In a way that, like, arguably all the arguably all people do that, but I feel like Nair is most clearly on the page, where like he simultaneously believes Surway is like, it's Surway enough, but also he knows it's not Surway, right? And in the same way, I feel like he views himself both as this like being, but also he thinks, it's all bullshit and none of that is meaningless. I don't know. I mean, that's just how I read him. That, I feel like he's constantly holding these competing thoughts in his head. And to me, that's like representative of his madness, that he's unable to, like, he just views the world in a way that is so multidimensional in a paradoxical way, that he just believes all of these paradoxes. But again, that's just my reading of it at this point.
I interpret it quite a lot different, in that I think he's like you could argue that he's one of the most sane characters in the books, because he's one of the characters, I think, that most understands what's going on with him and what's going on in the world. Because he's what, if you think about it, he's one of the few characters which thinks inward. He's like, he's trying to analyze himself. He's trying to understand how he's thinking, why he's thinking all these things. Everyone else projects outwards until Callus makes them think about themselves, right? And what you said about Surway, how I understand it is that he loved Surway and he considered her part of his tribe, and that also implies ownership because of their, how it is in their society. But he knows that fake Surway is not real, but he's willing to, how do I say, he's willing to accept the fakeness, and he's like, okay, I know it's fake, I'll just accept it. I know it's not real, but it's gonna heal me in some way. It is what I need, even though it's not what it's real. I know part of me can pretend that it's real. That's how I understand. Like, he knows himself, he knows his instincts, so he can coexist with both accepting things he knows is not true with half of his mind, but also just embracing his instincts, just like embracing his violence, embracing his culture in some cases, embracing all of these things.
I don't even disagree with that. I think in some ways I was trying to say something very similar, which is that I think, again, like you're describing the sort of paradoxes that I think he's living, where like he knows Surway is not Surway, but he still like allows himself to live the delusion,
But, yeah.
So there's this simultaneous awareness, like he, and I would agree that he loves Surway, but not in a way that's like I think all the root of that feeling is Surway is just sort of his proof that he's not, the faggot weeper, right? That he's the big tough guy, that he's like, I don't think he like genuinely has romantic feelings for her. Not in any way that at least in my point of view of the world would identify as like sort of, not in the way like Akemi and Esmenet, for example, I feel like feel about each other, right?
Different.
To me, Surway, again, it embodies like an object. Like she is literally a prize to him. She is this chalice that embodies this ideal, like this fantasy, which he's living now in the most literal sense, because it's not Surway, right? So again, I'm right there with you that I think like he is like you said, weirdly, like he's the most self-aware of anyone other than Kellis. But like I totally am with you on that. I do think he's crazy, but I think strangely his craziness is part of what lets him be self-aware, because it lets him, again, I think in the same way that his madness, he's so broken, he can actually break himself off even briefly from the darkness that comes before. It's like, it's this weird paradoxical state where he's just like so like destroyed as a person that he's actually wise, but he still isn't like functioning in a way that I view as like not in Kellis, where like Kellis to me has complete self-control, even if, he's a monster, but he has control of himself. Generally, he's had like a couple, towards the end of the book, where he like had his breaks, but they were fleeting moments. But Nair to me is like gaining more and more control, certainly from where he was in book one, but that he still has a degree to which he like hasn't fully achieved that state of, again, I think control is really the right word, that like he still is kind of living. And I think part of it is embodied by the fact that he keeps he knows it's all bullshit, but he keeps still living these like Skilvendi ideals. I think.
Can someone just leave everything is like, once you've gone through it, can you really detach yourself, break down all the things all the cultural norms, everything that makes you, I guess, sort of in society, without going crazy, without devolving into something,
I think that's the whole premise of the Logos, though. Like, I feel like that's sort of the point, is that he continues to in some way let the past define him in a way that Kellis, at least Kellis believes he does not. I think that's also up in the air, right? Is Kellis even fully cut off in the past, right?
But do you think once you're an adult already, do you think it's possible to go back to the level Kellis was? Because he was trained, he never had the framework that, everyone else grew up through.
I mean, I don't know.
Is it possible to dismantle it? I don't know.
I don't know. It is an interesting question.
That would be a lot of unlearning that you would have to do, and I think it would be. I think it would be very difficult. I think what's happening here is, you said, Dan, you said that he seems to be the most sane. In a way, he is, but it's like he's introspective, but he's also aware. He's like awakened in a way that is very unsettling to his nature as a Skilvendi barbarian, breaker of men with multiple wives and many children.
Yeah.
And that past also is basically gone. So I think that I really like what your interpretation, Carl, and I don't know if makes me think actually about myself, to be honest, because if you've ever lived somewhere else, or I think a few of us on the call probably have lived in a different country, and you detach yourself from where you come from, and in a way, even your culture or whatever, I can totally relate in a way to what he's going through. But in this context, it is so much more extreme because he's also seeing the madness of Kellis that's going on and nobody else sees it. I think that's a big part of that, might be part of what really is, but also he's dealing with his own sexuality and so many other things at the same time. So it's quite a complex character, and I'm amazed that Bakker is able to continue developing him in this way.
I agree. He's again just a character that I particularly by the end of book 2, I was like, I don't know where you take this character from here. Like, where does he go? I almost was like at the point where Kellis considered killing him. I almost was like that. This would seem like a moment to write him out of the story. Like, I feel like his arc was done, but no, he still had so much room. Like, I got to give Bakker credit. He's really just continued, like you said, Mike, finding new ways to develop Nair. It's really interesting.
Not to change the subject, but that there was a part where I thought he was going to be killed by Confis, and it's, I guess, it's still maybe. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm not where they ended. I have to reread maybe the last few paragraphs again, but he had the realization that he was, Kellis supposedly had sent him to deal with Confis, but in reality, Nair realized that, oh yeah, I shouldn't take anything he says, and he wanted to be killed by Confis. So apparently Kellis knew what was going to happen. I don't know how he knew that, Confis was going to be emperor and escape and all. There's a lot that happens in terms of plot points. Yeah. So I wonder if Kellis wants something done, like, I guess it's probably, I don't know. I would be curious how Nair is able to thwart being killed. He was very close. So now that he's, again, like I said, in league with the consult, that must have been what he had decided. I don't think it was very clear to me per se, but he must have decided this is, I can survive this way by becoming. It didn't seem that way per se, but that is what ended up saving him from being, I guess, killed in the last chapter. Unless I totally read that wrong. What was your interpretation of that?
Your turn, Barsha.
Yep.
I honestly, the Nair sections, I felt very disoriented, and I think, and after a point, I sort of just like let myself be disoriented rather than try to understand too much detail. But um, yeah, yeah, I think that it was interesting that Confess wanted to um was briefly considering trying to make him the, what is it now, exalt general
Yeah.
of the army. So I think these two characters are really interesting because they're both, well, I guess Confess never had any preconceived notions to fight with, and um what's his name, Nair is wrestling with his own. And so those two characters together, placing them together, I think is really interesting what Baker did there. But yeah, back to the disorientation bit. I think writing wise, I think that's excellent because I felt as disoriented as Nair did. But also that also meant I didn't understand a whole lot of what was going on.
Yeah, the writing in there's POV gets very obtuse is maybe too harsh a word, but it's confused, right? And I think it's very intentional. It sometimes leaves me like rereading passages multiple times to make sure I'm like following what's going on here,
Yeah.
and certainly having to read very closely. And I think it's well done. I do think sometimes Baker, like Steven Erikson, actually goes a little too far in like being a little too unclear about what's exactly going on. But generally, I think it certainly adds, particularly with Nair, to a level of ambiguity. And yeah, I think the conflict, the inner conflict, and the, however you want to define it, whether it's madness or whatever, the storm inside Nair, it is quite tempestuous, and that definitely comes out on the page. I just want more Proyas. I miss the Proyas Nair buddy cop duo. That was that was probably the healthiest Nair was in all the books. He wasn't like, I don't know, was he going around raping people then? Maybe he was. I don't know.
He was.
Yeah, never mind. That dude, he's always a bad guy. Never mind. I don't know. But he's a great character.
I seem to recall, Dan, did you say Proyas was your favorite character from this trilogy? We haven't gotten enough of him yet.
Not in
I
this
just say he's a very interesting character.
Oh, okay.
I thought you said you liked Confess.
Oh, maybe
I like Confess is my favorite. Yes.
Your favorite character, yeah.
And I do like this part too, even though he's being manhandled a bit, I guess. It's still very.
That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah. I mean,
or an unfortunate way to put it.
Yeah, well, that scene where just, suddenly like Nair just hits him. It's so, I mean, for me, it's so visceral. It's like, because like you don't expect it. He didn't expect it. You don't expect it. He's just gonna get hit because you just assume like in our society, you just assume people are not gonna randomly come to you and hit you, right? And if someone does, it's like, again, it breaks the whole, like you can see there, he's also, his whole confidence is broken for that, only that part, like his confidence is gone. If you think about all the books, and even after that, he regains it because he takes control again. But for that moment, he truly feels powerless, and he feels fear, and he feels, I don't know, like, not admiration, but he's sort of like, he sees Nair as this bigger than him figure, while he always put himself above. I think it's just a very powerful scene.
I agree.
Mm.
And it's, yeah. But then he goes back to being himself, I guess.
And I think in the conversation with Nair and Confess, when he's awakening him, he says, is that when he tells him, I wish it had been you, then I'd know for sure who led the, what is Kid? I forget where, but the battle where the Sylvendi and Confess meet them for the first time. And sorry?
I think it's
maybe, yeah.
Kiyuth.
I thought it was Kiyuth or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that also rare moment of, I wouldn't go so far as to call it vulnerability, but just doubt, I guess, in Confis, when he wonders whether he could have defeated the Sylvendi if Nair had been leading them. So yeah, that's interesting, and
Admiration, I guess.
maybe, yeah,
A bit.
maybe we'll almost think
Yeah.
we'll see a face off now eventually in some form.
But it's a very, yeah, I like that scene because it just shows how fragile our societal constructs are, right? But how easy they are to break if you just want to break them and you're not bound like Mayor,
Hmm.
right? To all those rules, those, because if you think about it, like they have this, what's it called? The Jian, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jian. Like everything is built so this intricate network. Oh, I have to do these little things to manipulate people. But in reality, you could just violently break everything or kill someone, right?
Mm.
Yeah,
It's just, yeah,
Yeah.
how we build these very complex things, which are in reality just nothing.
absolutely. It's all a mirage, right? Yeah, takes one person to come in, and
Yeah.
I mean, in real life, you can see that in the most horrible, violent ways, right? Like you talk about mass shooters or anything, just like someone, you know, showing how fragile everything is. It's
Yeah.
it's it's great stuff. Nair is a force of nature, certainly.
Yeah.
Which, on a
He might be
similar
the best
note,
character, but
I will say Kellis is too good at everything. The magic was like that was a step. He learned magic in like 2 weeks. That if I have one critique for this section, I was like that was a lot. That was it. It was just
I
so
agree.
fast. He's literally perfect at everything. And
that's his thing.
yeah, and at least he's like a bad guy, so it like adds to the tension rather than taking away from it. So it doesn't drive me like it doesn't really drive me nuts. And like you do get these great scenes like when he does learn the magic and his eyes are glowing and it's just like it's very visceral, it's very cinematic. But I do have moments where I'm just like, is there anything this guy can't do? He's just absolutely, I mean, prodigy is the word, right? At everything, at like literally everything he's tried to do.
Yeah. But what can stop him, right? What can stop? What is he trying to do that someone might try and stop him? That's the question, right?
Well, I thought it was interesting that the consult was like, "Yeah, we're pulling for him. He's leading. He's headed to Shima. He's bringing the holy war, and that's what we want."
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. So
Yeah.
they're like, in his supporting him in that sense. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Varsha.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say I did wonder why the consult would try to kill him, given that he is continuing to take the war to Shima, and yeah, they did address that in this section. That the consul's like, yeah, we're letting them go. We're letting him have it for now because he's going where we want them to.
I mean, he is purging all their spies from
Mhm.
the First Crusade, right? And from the positions of power and everything. So
Oh, that's also why. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, maybe as long as he's successfully bringing the holy war to Shime, they'll be okay with it.
plus, if he reveals what he's revealing the console to everyone, which is the worst thing that for the console, right? But what we want is just to be in the shadows, I guess,
Mm.
and
You're
to
right.
let people think they don't exist.
I think I that might have been what the bird said to Nair or something. It's definitely came up where they said that we wanted him to go bring the holy war. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that's obvious. Yeah, he's revealing a lot of. Is he revealing all of them? I don't know, because at one point I remember maybe in book 2 it was like, yeah, I've identified. I think it was like 20, but then only a few had had been revealed. So part of me thinks maybe some of it is for show. I don't know.
That he's revealed
seem-
people as consult who aren't consult.
No.
Well,
no.
but would realize. Sorry.
No. Go ahead. I was saying that. I was saying that like I'm just never convinced with anything in this book. So like I was thinking like, maybe there was 50 consult spies and Kellis sees all of them, but he only shows to the rest of the world that he's identified, a few of them. But because for all we know, because he can see the future, or he can see what people's intentions are. Maybe he wants them for, whatever his goals are to get to Moengus. He wants them to be around. But I'm now going way off on a tangent here.
There was something I noticed in the second read I didn't notice the first time, but on page 123 in my copy, that they noticed golden halos around Kellis's hands.
I saw that.
What's happening at that time? I don't remember.
I think it's at the beginning of chapter 5. I don't think a whole lot was going on. I think they were just kind of observing Kellis, I think.
Yeah. What could
I
that
think it's
mean?
chapter 6, maybe.
Very peculiar.
Very peculiar.
Yeah. See, I was wondering, that because I remember someone mentioning the golden halos, and I was like, is this just like a prophet? Like they're just imagining it, they're drinking the Kool-Aid. But then Achamian, does he see them too? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what that's interesting. You point that out.
I assume you already mentioned it before, but it's very biblical. A lot of the stuff that's happening, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very. Oh. Yeah. Is Kellis Jesus? Is he? Maybe. I hope not. I hope Jesus was a nicer person than Kellis. I hope.
Speaking of biblical, did anybody see a parallel with? Was it the son of Kelmomus, who has like all these different gospel around him? That was revealed. I think when Esmenet was talking about when she was reading is it the sagas? Gosh,
yeah.
But I saw a parallel, somewhat of a parallel there with Kellis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To your point about Kellis learning things too fast, they seem to imply here that Kelmemonus, is that the name of the king who Akamin keeps seeing die every time, who Esmenet was reading about? They seem to imply that he is talented, like he's smart and more talented, like something of a prodigy himself. And maybe Anasurimbor are like that in general, and add Dunian abilities to that expands his ability to learn, perhaps. Like I remember highlighting the bit about that she reads in the sagas about the guy.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's been a while since him, though.
Spinning off from all of that, we got an interesting, juicy little tidbit that probably doesn't matter for at least this trilogy, but maybe doesn't matter at all. Although actually could potentially matter a lot. Talking about that Anasurimbor line, there was the implication that Seswatha was the father of Kelmomus's kid.
Oh, really? Where? What?
When Esmenet was reading the sagas, was it when she was reading the sagas, or was someone else talking? I don't know, but there was at some point there was mentioned the idea that Seswatha and Kelmomus had a falling out, and they did not reunite until the apocalypse, and to fight off the No God. And the big reason for it proposed was that it was over his relationship with the son, the prince, because there were some rumors that Kelmomus' favorite lover had in fact coupled with Seswatha, and that the prince was Seswatha's son. This is like a throwaway. There was like one line about it, but it did stand out to me because I was like, ooh, that is juicy. That is interesting. And it's extra meaningful because if everyone is descended, I mean, I don't know, is it descended from that son? The family tree is a little unclear to me, but if it is, Kellis isn't even on a Assyrian board then, not by blood.
Interesting. Well, he is one of the few, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But I don't think that's genetic, right? Because like
It's not genetic. Oh, you can just born that way.
Like Achaemenid's family was not magicians.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Well, maybe we haven't done that part.
I think this character's name is now Coyote, and I find that difficult to pronounce. But
yeah, I can't. I was having trouble even just remembering it because of that. Yeah, it is interesting, and they snuck in. I mean, all of that stuff in the sagas. It's interesting what we all learn there. I love that stuff. Getting the ancient history. They snuck into Golgotha. Crazy. I want to know. I want to read the sagas now. Like, give me the sagas. I want to know what the hell happened.
I like it too. I think I used the word information dump, and I think that's the wrong terminology because I do like it, and I hate to say it. I started reading the encyclopedic glossary a bit. I'm admitting it.
I think parts of it are information dumps. Like we get like pages of it, but it's so compelling and interesting that like who cares? And that goes to show, right? Like info dump, it doesn't have to be a bad thing, especially when it like, it does matter. Again, especially if like, we're talking about, a throwaway line, but potentially the whole Anasurian board line is, bloodline is false, right? Like that's interesting. That's juicy material.
Speaking of, I always, on my first read, I always loved these descriptions of the arc of the skies.
Sick. What is it? They describe like two golden horns. Does anyone have any idea what that actually like looks like? I could not picture like what is
two horns.
Is it literally just like two parts of it that just like extend out, kind of like okay. I wasn't sure. Like, am I supposed to be picturing like wings? Like what is?
I was imagining that it was like if it was a spaceship or whatever, that the rest of it might have been buried. That was
definitely.
What was
so
that's what
like
was
out.
jutting out of the earth.
That makes sense.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, no, I was going to say there is artwork out there that you can see the horns, but I would probably stay away if you don't want it. Because you'll probably find maps and things. So
can't do it.
Yeah,
technically, none of it is official. Also, so
yeah, but
to help picture. Yeah.
Well, there's going to be descriptions in the future books of things.
That's cool. I'm definitely going to try to be very careful about artwork. Luckily, I got away with it at the end of the Warrior Prophet with the Inkaroi, but I spoiled so many things in Malazan for myself by looking up fan art. They're just like right there blatantly. So I'm going to be careful. Don't want to do that to myself again.
I mean, the other thing that I know is a future book that came up is The Ordeal, but maybe that's a different.
I mean, it's the name of one of the books, so.
But that's but they don't say the Great Ordeal. They say The Ordeal, I think, and that's Kelmomis's holy war against Golgotha, and I didn't understand how is that a holy war. But maybe
the no god.
They are so the Golgotha is like the stronghold of the Inkaroi, who then are the Mengeka, who later become the consult. So how are they like a religion? That's the part I didn't understand. I also could have maybe completely botched that, but I think that's the way I understood it.
Well, we're gonna get to it, I think.
Is Golgotha a place or a being?
It's a place.
It's a place. Yeah, we know that.
It's a city.
Because
Yeah,
the
we
the
don't.
crow person thinks something to himself that it sounded like he thought Golgotha was someone he needed to report to, but maybe it's someone there that he needs to.
Well, you can. A lot of times you say, "Oh, I need to report back to that city." We're just talking
Mhm.
about people there, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah,
The Nair compared the task, sorry, the faces, the consult faces to Tusk, to the Tusk. There was a whole sentence there. Do you think that has some origin story of the Tusk somehow? I'm trying to find it, but I think it was in chapter 9 when he's thinking about the faceless ones, and then he says, like the tusk. And,
I think I
oh, yeah,
remember that. Yeah.
tusks. Yeah, thorns, tusks. They were spears concealed in the thickets of human activity. Thorns, tusks.
That washed right over me. No, I didn't. Although you are reminding me not to jump away because it's tied to this. Bro, this dude straight up kissed the thing when it opened its face. That
Yeah.
was there are no words. There are no words.
Nope.
Disgusting doesn't even come close. That was unreal. He just went
So
all in French kiss that alien mutant. Oh
It's very open. It's just very,
that's
accepting.
his prize,
exactly.
He's very
Yeah.
attached to Sarway. I thought, and again, so I've definitely shared things where I'm like, what happened before? I don't know what the hell's going on. I thought that he had a face hugger. I thought that Nair then got a new face attached to him.
Right?
Did anybody else think that or no?
So I had moments of confusion where I thought Nair is also like concept, kind of like Sarcellus a little bit, almost like that. But not quite because he still has awareness of himself. Like the thing called Sarcellus only thought of himself as a thing called Sarcellus.
Mhm.
This feels like he's been possessed by the consult, especially that scene with Confess when later he doesn't remember. He thinks to himself, apparently he had been beaten up last night, but he doesn't remember that he was the one who did the beating. Uh, yeah, that felt
Yeah.
like something's going on there with like. At first, I thought maybe he's been replaced by Consult and we're not made aware of that yet. But then there's too much of Nair in the thoughts, in the monologues, that
Mhm.
for it to be Consult, maybe it's just possession, some kind of possession. I don't know.
I thought that when after he kissed the whatever the thing, it said something about he could feel its muscles beneath twitching beneath his skin.
Mhm.
Anyway, I thought nobody saying.
Yeah.
I was confused. I thought I thought maybe it's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or something, and they're taking his DNA or whatever so that they can imprint and then make a copy of him. That's kind of what I thought might be going on. I don't know.
But if they needed that, then one of the Consult would have had to kiss Kellus, no? And they
Good point.
didn't, as far as we know.
Or maybe they got some of his DNA some other way.
That's true.
Okay.
Grab the cup of water he drank.
Yeah,
Yeah, why not?
or some hair or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought that there was some kind of initiation or something maybe going on.
Mm,
Who knows? We'll find out. That was at the
Yeah.
end of the last chapter, so we don't know. I didn't read ahead.
so about sort of new topic, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Go for it.
About the fact that Nair is dropping away a lot of his preconceptions, right? Esmenet is also grappling or like sort of redoing her worldviews. There's a line about how she's rewriting Nyan, and it. I think those are two interesting uh, people that Callis has affected, except Esmenet it's less consciously than with Nair. Esmenet is a lot more accepting of the societal changes that Callis is bringing about because I guess she stands to benefit from them. But Nair has to force himself to rethink things that are deeply ingrained. Like they both are rethinking things that are deeply ingrained in their psyche, but Esmenet is far more accepting because it suits her. But Nair, maybe ultimately it would suit him, but he doesn't know that yet. So he's struggling with it a lot more.
I think Nair wants to accept his society. I feel he wants to accept Patricia's side, but now that he has seen more, he's having harder time doing it.
Yeah, he wants to, yeah, I guess Esmenet didn't like being a part of the society that she was in. Nair wants to be a part of the society, and they both get the opposite. Yeah, like I mean Esmenet kind of gets what she wants. Nair doesn't.
I agree with that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a really good insight. I don't think Nair has anywhere to go. I don't think, which is why maybe he's turning to the dark side or what have you.
Turning.
Yeah, I don't. How much
Returning?
Returning.
Oh, okay.
Return?
How much of what Nair is doing now is conscious? I feel like he's just sort of riding the waves at the moment, going where the consult is taking him because he doesn't, almost like he doesn't want to think or doesn't want to deal with himself. So he's like, yeah, these guys are taking me somewhere. I'll go with them. I don't feel like he's consciously planning anything or doing none of the things he's doing are because he wants to. It's more that like things are just happening to him and he's taking micro decisions in the moment, but I don't feel like he's doing any long-term planning or making any long-term decisions. It's just like, oh, I'm being taken away by the consult, cool, I'll go with them. Oh, survey's protecting me, like, oh, survey's here to kiss me, cool, I'll, or here, let me beat Confus up. And yeah.
I think at the very end of the section we just read, that's true. But I think when he's with Confus, he's certainly actively thinking and planning about how to deal with Confus and how to deal with Kellis. I mean, I'm not convinced he isn't making plans. Like, I think that's still up in the air, just from my point of view of it. But I'm really unclear of if he is planning what he's planning. And so I do feel, I mean, he's definitely along for the ride to some sense, right? I mean, just fundamentally, he's not like struggling against the consult. He's going along with them. And so, now that he's on the run, he's sort of just like, all right, we're going. Yeah, I don't know if he's planning. We'll see. I think that will become clear in the coming chapters. But I do think when he was in the city, he was Jokta. He was actively, even if, it wasn't long term. Like he has that whole moment where he thinks about how Kellis is thinking past Shime, and that like blows his mind because he can't imagine a world past Shime. Moingus is so devoured every part of him that's like the end of the world to him.
Yeah, I feel like he's trying to find where he belongs now. He doesn't belong anywhere. I feel like he doesn't, with anyone, with any part of society. Like what? I don't know. He doesn't know what he wants, what his role is, I guess.
Yeah, I guess he can't go back home. And yeah.
Honestly, if he really wants to live out that Scovindi life, going with the consult ain't a bad idea. They're kind of about similar things, so they're worse places for him to go.
They worship the same gods, no?
Right. And they're all about, going and killing people and raping and being just the worst. So, if he's following his
Yep.
heart's desire, like, can't argue with that.
His heart
Exactly. They
desires to be just the West.
have similar values. I agree.
But I feel like now he's having trouble with that because like he could go back, but he knows where like how restrictive it is. I guess it would be like he would have to put himself somewhat into that cage of culture and tradition, right? And now he's having trouble fitting in it. Probably, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he is unsure of where he fits. He doesn't think that, but I think he is very, like, I think that's what he's feeling, like he doesn't know where he fits in. And to some degree, I think arguably that's what he's always felt. He just wasn't aware of it, that like he didn't fit into Skilvindi culture. He just wasn't really sure, what else there was for him.
Well, I feel like he started feeling that way because of Moengus, right?
Right.
Before Moengus sort of unlocked him, I guess.
Definitely.
Maybe that's why he has to kill him. I don't know.
And that'll help.
It will lock him back in.
Yeah, that's what will happen. Not the sense of despair that comes after getting what you want, and then what the hell do I do with my life now?
Yeah, he would have no idea. Like the dog that catches its own tail, he would have no idea. I just can't imagine. He's not prepared to actually deal with Moengus. Not at all.
But maybe that's what he thinks. He thinks when he can kill Moengus, he can go back because Moengus is the thing that destroyed his.
Oh, totally.
Right.
Yeah, like that's the for him the sort of reset button, right? But nah, he no chance. I mean, I do think that he's lived this long, he will get to meet Moengus. Like that's a prediction I feel comfortable making. That they will have a confrontation one way or another. I would be shocked at this point if they don't.
Maybe Moengus dies before he can get there.
That would be insane. If Moengus is already dead and they show up and it's the biggest anticlimax, like he's not even been around. He's just that would be, I can't even imagine.
He could be a skin spy.
I would be so mad, honestly, if Moengus is dead. Like, someone's got to talk to him. I just want to see Moengus once. Like, he doesn't have to live for long. I just want to see one scene with Moengus.
One thing. Yeah. Maybe we have seen several, and Moengus is Mathan.
Right, exactly. Or there's that, right? We know Mathanet's coming. What is Mathanet's deal? I don't know.
We don't know.
That's still a question mark. I'm actually surprised. I did not think it was going to take this long to unveil the mystery of Mathanet, but it's like going to be like the end of the book before we, figure out what his secret is.
Yeah, speaking of, I feel like these chapters started a lot of threads. I mean, they're connected to the larger story, sure, but I feel like they also started new things that I'm like, we're halfway through the last book. I'm curious where this is going or how much we leave off for the next series.
A lot.
What specifically are you talking about? Because I think definitely there are a lot of ideas, particularly in like the backstory of the world and things like that. And obviously we're not going to deal with all the consult stuff, but I just feel like, Nair and Conthus, the storyline there feels like it's a continuation. Certainly it's weird in ways I didn't expect, but that is a continuation. Kellis has finally learned magic, which seemed inevitable. And Akamian and Asmonet's relationship has continued to develop in ways that are, I feel like are like, again, unexpected in some ways, but are stepping stones that do feel like they've been laid out, I guess.
Oh, I agree that everything's like cohesive and feels like part of the story that's already been going on. It's more that wrapping up and bringing all these things to an end point feels like a tall order for the last 200 pages of the trilogy. So like,
that's fair.
We've had everyone go off to different places, right? Nair is going to that new spaceship thing, I guess, and what's his name? Confus is, I guess he's going to try and take over the Holy War again, so maybe there'll be some convergence there. But
That's
Yeah.
the word, right?
Yeah,
Lads and fans, that's the word. We're definitely going for a big convergence at Shime, which is what we were promised right at the opening, and I think
Yeah.
Bakker's going to pay it off. Which I got to get. I mean, that's like basic structural thing, right? That like, you know, you make a promise you're going to go to this place, like everything needs to end up at that place, and I am excited. You know, it's like it's Mordor and Lord of the Rings, right? I'm excited to see the payoff there.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
I think it is going to be that convergence, right? Where like literally all the characters are going to come together. I mean, even Maythanet left Rome. He's coming out here, you know, like we're going to get them all. And I think that's the way Bakker will stick the landing. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt here because I'm with you. Like there is a lot to resolve in 200 pages. Like if this book was 400 more pages rather than 200, I would be like, yeah, that's reasonable. You know, there's a lot to do, but we'll see.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, I feel like, I mean, if I could use an analogy, I feel like we're still climbing. We're not, like, we haven't started the descent yet.
Right.
I would have expected to start descending by now, but
The action is still rising.
Absolutely.
It feels in a lot of ways still.
Yeah, we definitely haven't gotten to the climax of this book, for sure. So,
I will say I looked ahead while we were reading. We get to Shime in these chapters, the next chapters we're going to read. So I'm ready. It's we're going to start it. I guarantee Shime, that's where it turns. I'm ready.
do you think we find out what Maythanet's deal is in these chapters or the ones after that?
I would be shocked if it's in the literal last 100 pages because I feel like you need a lot of time to deal with the ramifications. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, you know, but that would really shock me is if we get to the end of the next 100 pages and we don't have the majority of answers. Like I'm sure there will still be some secrets, but obviously there are plenty of secrets for the next series, but I just mean like kind of the main stuff, like what's Maythanet's deal and like where's Moingus and that sort of thing. I would be shocked if we don't figure that out pretty quickly in Shime.
Yeah.
Because it just, you know, if not the first chapter, then the second chapter in Shime.
That's okay. Yeah.
That's just my guess. I mean, I don't know.
No, that makes sense. I'm kind of like wanting for that to happen. I don't have any evidence to say that this is what will happen. Like maybe that is the climax that they all meet there because, well, I guess they have to deal with the son of the Padi Raja that they killed, which I think Padi Raja is like hilarious. The name because I mean, so I think I've been reading Dune, so I kind of think I know what Bakker tried to do because Padishah, he took that, and then Raja means king, so he probably did the thing where he took the Padishah and then did Padi Raja out of that. But as far as I know, that's not a word in any of the Indian languages, and Padishah is just, you could say, a modification of the word Badshah. And maybe some languages write it as Padishah, but Padi Raja, the only translation I can think of is half king in Tamil. So I read it like that. I don't know if he based it on any actual word in a language, but for
No, I
me,
think you're
in
right.
my mother tongue, Padi Raja is half a king. so it's hilarious every time I read it.
I didn't even connect
maybe it
to
means
the
something in Arabic or Persian, maybe. But I think there is a India equivalent in Yarwa, sort of.
Which have you been there yet?
I think it's Nilnamesh.
Oh.
I think.
I thought so too.
Just like Zoom is the Zoom or whatever you pronounce it is the sort of Africa equivalent, I guess.
Okay.
It is Persian, but it's what I think he's bait. Well, I mean, but I think Raja, I think you might be right that he's mixing the words, Barsha, because I hadn't even made that connection, but you're totally right. It's the Padishah emperor thing, right? Like
I was
Padishah,
thinking
like,
about the Pasha, right? The Ottoman Pasha, like high-ranking, right? I was thinking that when I was reading it.
So that's where Dune got it from, probably, right? But Bakker probably got it from Dune, and then he changed the Shah bit to Raja.
I totally agree with you,
Yeah.
Varsha. I think the etymology there is he's bending. I mean, the same way you look at like Game of Thrones, right? And you have Cal, and that's just Khan, right? Like Khal Drogo is
True.
just, you know, he's the Genghis Khan character, right? Like,
Yeah.
How is it spelled? Spelled Padrisha?
which are you asking for, the real word or the one in Irwa?
The one in Erwa.
It's Padrijah.
RJ. Okay.
I think I said that right.
Maybe.
So, are there any other topics before we start doing quotes?
We need our quotes. I need my hit.
Yes, Steve.
Is that Mackie or what?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see. On page 132, the estranged always resorted to talk of third parties. On page 162, one I really like a lot. That hope is little more than the premonition of regret. This is the first lesson of history.
Yeah, I like that one.
164, where hope burns bright, patience is quickly consumed.
Yes.
And 192, when the trials of the world broke men, the outside leaked into the world.
Interesting.
Those are my favorites.
Interesting.
Good quote.
Nice.
I got one. I don't know what page it is. There were two paths. Nair understood that now. There was the path that men remembered, and there was the path that determined. And rarely, if ever, were they the same. All men stood in thrall of the latter.
Nice.
And knowing this made them insane.
I like that. Yeah, I have that underlined, that one. And I think that's what Carl was referring to earlier with the whole...
That was one of the passages. Yeah.
One.
So page 119, the epigraph, history, logic, arithmetic, these all should be taught by slaves. Anyone have any idea what that's saying? Like, I understand in the most literal, like that's very literal. It's very straightforward, but I don't understand like why. I could not figure out why those subjects should be taught by slaves. What is this? I mean, the author's anonymous too. Like what does that mean?
Maybe it's because those subjects don't require input from the teacher to put their own, like, I guess, knowledge or experiences or something like that. So say a slave can teach them because there's no value that the slave needs to bring these topics to life, I guess, maybe. He just needs to repeat what other people smarter than him taught him before.
I get what you're saying.
I'd agree with you for logic and arithmetic, but history seems like a very dangerous, quote unquote, dangerous thing to ask a slave to teach.
Yeah. Yeah. I also, yeah. History, that is a big one for a slave to teach, right? That's...
No.
Because if slaves taught history, maybe there wouldn't be any slaves.
Oh, damn. Getting real.
Your past self may not recognize you. Oh. Don't remember what that note was about. I had this underlined, like it's not a quotable quote, but I think this was important. And he realized that he would gladly die for Anasurumbur Kellis. He would begrudge no sacrifice despite his unrequited love. That is terrifying. that I think Akamian, Nair, yes, but someone like Akamian, you really want him to look into at least some of the manipulation that Kellis is doing willfully. But it seems that he has no clue.
He's blind.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he doesn't want to see it, even if it was available, right?
Yeah.
Because he is what he's been waiting for, right?
Yeah. He has that moment of, I want to call it awareness, when Kellis asks him, hey, did you ever try it with two unutterables or whatever that was when he's teaching him the gnosis?
Mhm.
And Akamian does not tell him about the long-lasting debate because the thought he has is he gave someone belladonna. He didn't actually do the killing, but 3 people died anyway. All he had to do was pass along some poison, and he's terrified of what this would do in Kellis's hands. So it seems that he's starting, at least he has some realization of what could be wrought with it if like by Kellis, but I don't know, is he not giving in to the full extent of that thought, or was that just a passing thought that no one should have this knowledge? Maybe that's what it is. He's certain that Kellis will figure it out, but no one really should.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know. It takes a while to realize, but
Yeah.
probably. But he's a prophet or something, right? It's not easy for him to. Like he's testing him all. He was testing him all the way, right? At every step, he was sort of like, "Prove me wrong,"
Yeah.
or prove me right. Like I need some way that you need to convince me to, overcome my reluctance. Because he wanted, but he wants him to prove that he's the prophet, right?
Do you think Kellis wants is the dreams that the mandate schoolmen have, is that a product of learning the gnosis, or is that something that is bequeathed to them as a gift? Like, here, you've graduated, now you can have nightmares every night.
I think wasn't it mentioned about Inrao that he could leave because he hadn't started seeing the dreams or something, right?
Yeah. Had he been taught the gnosis, or
I think some introductory, so maybe not the actual gnosis. Maybe, I don't know, because he knew some magic, right? But not fully.
Yeah.
So maybe there's some leap you need to do that brings you to a different level, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. I'd be very curious what the dreams look like in Kellis's brain. If they become darkness that he needs to fight.
That's a great point. Now that Seth Waters in his head.
I mean, he wouldn't be afraid, I guess. So what is he gonna do with them?
Or would it change him?
Yeah, I guess because people, when they're there, they feel what Seswata is feeling, right?
Yeah.
But you're not in control of. Yeah, so I wonder how he would react to not being in control.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I have this one marked, though I don't think I know what it means. Love was never so simple as the marks with which it was written. Like, I mean, I kind of got it from the context around it, but the line in and of itself, I thought it was pretty, at least, if not something I fully understood. Cool. That seems like a good place to call it. Any other things that we should discuss? No? Okay, let's do outros. Steve, would you like to start us off?
Sure. You can find me on PageChewing.com. I'll be quick like Dan.
Nice.
Carl, we'll go clockwise.
Oh, yes. And you can also find me on PageChewing.com or on a lot of social media at Carl D. Albert.
Yeah, you can also find me under Mike M on PageChewing. And if you're so inclined, please tune in to the PageChewing comics and manga. Steve and I regularly talk about our picks of the week.
Mm-hmm.
So check that out.
Yeah. And you can find me at GFR17 on PageChewing Forum. Oh, quick like Steve.
Cycle, creating some cycles.
I know.
Yeah, and you can find me on the PageChewing forum as well, or on my YouTube channel, Reading by the Rainy Mountain. And I'll also plug our new sci-fi podcast called Speculative Speculations. The episodes have been coming out on Spotify in the last couple of weeks. We'll also start putting them out on YouTube in the next week or so. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see everyone in about a week with the next set of chapters. Bye.